Monday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a good weekend. Zach Jackson, Browns beat reporter from The Athletic, on the situation with Quinshon Judkins, who over the weekend was arrested on charges of domestic battery.
We don't know a ton. We have to let the facts come out. So we know he's out of jail. He is supposed to be hosting a youth football camp here in Cleveland tomorrow. We will see. But, outside the court case, and we know he's released, I don't think we have a date yet, right? At least late last night for his next hearing. Mm-hmm. We didn't. So the next date becomes the end of this week when he's supposed to report, and obviously he's one of, I believe, 30 second-round picks who remain unsigned. So we'll see. So that adds a different layer to this. So we have to let the facts come out here, and we'll see. And this contract situation with this means he could be in limbo, and he could end up missing valuable training camp time for multiple reasons. In these situations, the NFL begins investigating immediately, right, because of the use of the commissioner's exempt list and all of that. The team begins, obviously, investigating immediately, and they'll just have to trust what they see. I mean, it puts the importance of it being quickly of finding out, what they think really happened here. And so, maybe that will take care of itself in the legal system. We don't know at this point, but certainly him not being under contract adds a layer of mystery and potential complication in terms of him, being on the field. If the Browns have qualms, or if there is, a drawn out legal process coming up.
And we'll talk more about the Quinshon Judkins situation, probably more than we want to, a little bit later in the show. Kyle Long, talking about the Browns quarterback competition. This is from CBS Sports, pushing the pile.
Men don't last forever, but the oil business does, or something along those lines. Well, Joe Flacco is the oil business. He's 40 years old. He's going to win this competition. These young men are going to get spit out the ass end of an oil rig by the end of training camp, and Joe Flacco will emerge victorious, in my opinion. But whoever deals with the bumps in the road as a young quarterback the best throughout training camp, when we see him in preseason, who deals with pressure the best, who deals with getting through their progressions quickly and getting the football out. That is the theme in the National Football League right now. Get the football out. Which one of those three young quarterbacks will vie for the number 2 spot behind Joe Flacco? Because I know he probably gives them the best shot to win early on in the season.
Got to remember, Joe Flacco hasn't played more than 6, 7, 8 games in a decade. So that's going to be something else to monitor. He may be the starter week 1. How long can he survive as a 40-plus-year-old quarterback? Brock Vereen, talking about the Browns secondary.
For Cleveland, there are some moments I think Denzel Ward is the best cornerback in the NFL, and I'm justified in thinking that every now and then. So with Greg Newsome there, with Grant Delpit, I don't know why I'm the biggest Grant Delpit fan. Maybe
I love Grant Delpit.
Yeah, the secondary didn't play well last year. If they bounce back, that goes a long way in helping this defense bounce back to being among the best in the NFL. All right, Guardians trying to make it 3 out of 4 against the White Sox in Chicago, their final game before the All-Star break. Joey Cantillo on mound for the Guardians in the 4th inning. A scoreless game, and Cantillo misses a little bit too much over the plate. Austin Slater puts it in the seats in left field, a 1-0 lead. 5th inning, still 1-0. Actually, it's now 2-0, and it's Slater again. RBI single to center. That made it 3-0. White Sox with the lead. They couldn't do anything against Aaron Savali on the mound until the 6th. Kyle Manzardo got all of that. 3-run homer to give the Guardians a 4-3 lead. But in the 6th, Andrew Benintendi answers, and it is now that ties it at 4-4. In the 8th inning, Luis Robert down the left field line. That'll bring in another. Tied at 5. Goes to extra innings. In the 10th, Stephen Kwan, sacrifice fly. Not really deep, but deep enough to get the run home. 6-5. The Guardians win it. Stephen Vogt talked about the offensive struggles early in the game.
Savali was keeping us off balance. We were letting a lot of his cutters go. It was a good pitch, and that was really the first one that he left flat up over the middle. And Manzo was ready to go and didn't miss it. So I thought that was one of my favorite games of the year because I thought we played awful the first 5 innings. I thought our offense was dead. Cavaliers was doing whatever he wanted, and so for us to explode like that late off of him, that was really fun to see. I mean, it's awesome. We played great baseball on this trip. It was really fun to see our guys, turn that stretch around. Obviously, the 10 in a row hurt, but for us to just turn around and keep it rolling the whole time, it was a lot of fun, and we had multiple guys come up clutch, come up huge on this road trip, so it was a great trip for our team.
Guardians again facing some of the lesser teams in all of baseball with the White Sox and then the Orioles and then the A's. Those are games they're going to have to win if they're going to try to get back into this wild card race. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Jeff Lloyd up first. We're talking Browns on Sports4CLE.
You got so much to do. It's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day. 'Cause it's fun. So come on, great games wait for you and me, the Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day. Put a little play in your day.
We begin by talking Browns and talking about Quinshon Judkins, domestic violence. Was arrested on it in Florida over the weekend. Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio on if the Quinshon Judkins incident points to bad luck or bad research by the Browns.
I think it's a combination of both. Look, there's no way to know for sure who's going to be a problem, who's not going to be a problem. There wasn't any reason that I had heard of, and I'm very skeptical about the stuff that makes the rounds pre-draft because there's a 4D chess match that goes on with trying to maybe get a guy to slide if you really like him or get another team to take a guy if you really don't like him so the guys you want can slip down the board. But I hadn't heard anything that I recall about Quinshon Judkins. Stuff just happens. And it's bad luck, it's good luck, it's whatever luck. It just stuff happens, and then you have to move forward. And it's so early in the process of understanding what did or didn't occur between Quinshon Judkins and the alleged victim in the incident that resulted in him being arrested for misdemeanor domestic battery. We don't know how it's going to play out. It is something, though, that is now on the list of many things that Browns fans have to worry about. And that's all that fans of any team are trying to minimize, the number of things they have to worry about.
Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd, host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. And Jeff, the fans are one thing. It's the organization. This seems to be a regular occurrence. It's one thing to give guys second chances. I get that. And I don't want to – we're going to let the facts come out. But every year it's something.
It's obviously not an ideal situation, of course. And, of course, the second straight year the Cleveland Browns have spent a second-round selection on a player out of Ohio State. And, although there are some differences with each circumstance, the circumstances kind of are, similar. And, again, one thing to note, obviously, every state, just because a charge is a charge, doesn't necessarily mean, if the crime is committed in Ohio as opposed to Florida, that, the consequences of said charge are going to be the same in every municipality within every state within the United States of America. But look, it's just not an ideal situation. This team is trying to do everything they can to come back from what was a terrible, terrible 2024 season. And, one of the ways that you try to, ramp up some positivity, ramp up some excitement for your fan base as you were less than a week away from training camp beginning is, the new players, the draft picks. And the Browns certainly had a full draft class this year as opposed to years in the past. And, here we are again talking about something else besides actual football. Again, and it is difficult to discuss these things because when you were in the infancy state of all of this, you want to be able to show, the correct decorum to the victim. You have to also speak with the understanding that, the defendant, as in, Quinshon Judkins here to this point, he is charged, but he is presumed innocent until he's proven guilty. And, I think we got a lot of people that maybe get a little bit further down the road in speaking about these things, which probably isn't the best way to go because, you are talking about, a potential victim and a potential defendant here. And, none of us have any idea where this is potentially going to go. You do not want to hear about, obviously any cases of, people getting physical with the opposite sex. It's not the greatest moment here. And what was, starting to hopefully maybe pique everybody's interest and excitement for the Cleveland Browns in 2025, here we are again, getting away from actual football and unfortunately talking about something that, just seems to be, the proverbial right now for the Browns black eye. Just, it seems to be basically swelling out as opposed to maybe going away.
Yeah, and it's take a look at this since 2000. These are the number of arrests for franchises, and it seems like the Browns we've talked about a couple every year. Vikings had the most, Broncos with 57 since 2000, Broncos 56, Bengals 51, Jaguars and Chiefs 41, and the Browns 40. So it's not, I guess the point is, it's a league-wide problem that they got to deal with, and that's one of the reasons that they come down hard and they end up suspending people. When you might be found innocent, you're still going to be suspended because the league sees it as a problem they have.
Well, look, you cater your audience, obviously, to men, women, children. And, there's a certain message the league sends out. And, and as far as, the way they want the shield to be protected, the shield to be viewed, this certainly, hurts the overall product in that capacity. It's just not something, that works well. And, yes, in a perfect world, everybody would be, a law-abiding citizen within the league. But unfortunately, we have, these issues. And, every final mini camp closes the same way in June. The head coach gets up to the middle, tells everybody, hey, you got 3 weeks, you got a month, go enjoy yourselves, have some fun with your friends, have some fun with your family, be smart, be safe, be careful. And it's kind of, saying, please, do not get yourself in a situation. And unfortunately, here are the Browns, with everybody trying to get excited again, for the rookies to report on Friday, the veterans report after next weekend. And, some of, obviously the air is out of the balloon in regards to that. And, we're going to sit here again like we did, if 3 years ago with a quarterback and a couple of years ago with a defensive tackle. And, last year, obviously, with Mike Hall, where, we're all sitting here trying to play court TV where, essentially most of our jobs are, obviously, taking and viewing sports and giving our opinions on it. And, look, it's just not where anybody wants to be right now. It certainly does not help that Quinshon Judkins does not have a contract at this point. Most of, the NFL second-round draft choices, once you guarantee 2 players contracts, obviously almost all of them want the guaranteed contract. Don't think that's going to probably be an option for Quinshon Judkins, how this works out either way. Does he show up on Friday and the Browns basically say, okay, you've reported to training camp, why don't you go back home and just, stay there till, we're further down the road where we can say, yes, you're not a part of things right now, or yes, it's okay for you to come back. My guess is they will have him report and then just quietly excuse him to go home. But again, we're talking about things other than football right now, which is, not what we want to be doing. And also trying to show, the right amount of, respect to obviously the legal process here. All
right, before we go to break, there were young guys at running back before. Now there's even more questions. Can Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford comes back into it. And you have no idea when Judkins, signs his contract. He's probably not getting the guaranteed money. And how much is he going to miss in the regular season? Because even if the legal system finds him innocent, the NFL can still say, all right, you got to give us 4 games. You got to give us 6 games.
Yeah, and look, for the NFL, they go to work right away, obviously. You know what I'm saying? They're contacting everybody right away. They're not waiting for the legal process to work out. I would say, and this, and I don't want to make this sound like it's a good thing. But it was a misdemeanor charge. Last year, Mike Hall's charge was, it was not a misdemeanor. It was a little bit more significant. Hall eventually pled down, and it was, more of like a disorderly conduct that he eventually, pled guilty to. But regardless, he still ended up with a 5-game suspension. So, I mean, if you want a benchmark at this point, I would say you're probably somewhere within that 5-game. But, I mean, there's still, the legal process to go. Again, here we are, again, probably talking a little bit over our heads. But if you were looking at maybe a scenario at how this all works out, that would probably, be my guess is maybe, you're looking at somehow, some way, the charges going through, or he pleads down to something else, pays a fine, obviously apologizes to his victim, and then, he will face his day with the NFL. But you'd probably think somewhere around that 5-game suspension, maybe a tiny bit less because it was a misdemeanor charge. But, regardless, this is the road that we're kind of headed down right now, unfortunately, with Quinshon Judkins.
Jeff Lloyd and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout, so we turn our attention to the field. We'll also head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. A couple things. I was watching the show Friday, and you were giving the percentages, 5% for fifth round picks and 30% for third round. All that's out the window, Dave. Come on now. You got the talent, you got the talent. Look at Tom Brady. The list can go on and on where they got picks. Brock Purdy, for example. So I want to see Shedeur play. I think he's a lot better than Dylan Gabriel with game situations. And that'll be it, Dave. Be good, be safe, you and the family, and I love you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jeff, the only reason I point out, the percentages with quarterbacks and guys late, you're looking for an anomaly. This is not the normal. Tom Brady's not the normal. Brock Purdy's. Other than that, you probably can't name any quarterbacks. The other thing, I get people saying they have to see Shedeur. They're going to know by the way he prepares, the way he practices. Do we think he's ready to see what it's like in an NFL regular season game?
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And as you're saying anomaly, and we're trying to put all of this, when we keep in mind, when we are talking about Shedeur Sanders, this is a guy that nobody thought in any way whatsoever was going to end up ultimately being drafted in the 5th round as it was. So, I mean, if you're going to want to talk about an anomaly, Shedeur Sanders himself is an anomaly. He was a guy that probably carried a top 50 or maybe a top 75 grade within this draft class, ended up getting drafted 144th overall. I mean, if you want to have people agree on one thing, I think everybody will universally agree that he was much better than the 144 selection that was made in this draft. So it does give you an advantage because here is a guy that was drafted at 144 in the 5th round, but legitimately could be in contention to start, and I wouldn't say maybe week 1, but start certainly a lot faster than if a 5th round pick ever broke through to actually get to the starting opportunity. Certainly you would figure there's more of an accelerated path where Shedeur Sanders could be a 5th round guy to start than most 5th rounders in recent memory. Again, I think it comes down to what you feel Sanders can ultimately do. I don't think, getting in there and performing is something that's, would be over his head. I don't think it would be surprising if he got in there and played well. You do want to make sure that your offensive line is playing, well up to what the expectation is, because one of the biggest issues for Shedeur at Colorado was, that it was just a poor offensive line. And at times Shedeur ended up trying to do more than he probably should have while trying to avoid pass rush. And of course, do you have your other elements in place? Are your skill players performing? Obviously, it's a question now, where is the running game at? So you can have the benefit of the running game. I don't think it really should be a surprise, and we spend so much time talking 4 quarterbacks. I wouldn't be that surprised at all if it ended up that maybe it was Joe Flacco, and then at a certain time there was a switch made and it was Shedeur Sanders, and all this talk about 4 different quarterbacks ended up maybe just being just that, a lot of talk.
So we've talked a lot about wide receiver. Some news from around the NFL. 49ers wide receiver Juwan Jennings, scheduled to make $7.5 million this year, wants a new contract or wants to be traded. And remember, he was extended at the end of last training camp. Doesn't feel about this year. He either wants more money or he wants to be traded. Jennings is a guy. I mean, he was productive last year without question. Cedric Tillman intrigues me more, to be perfectly honest with you.
The thing here, and look, it's great in a bad year last year where some things certainly happened. Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, Jennings found the opportunity and, kind of took the opportunity and ran with it. And kudos to him. But, up until last year, this guy had predominantly been a role player. Certainly, with San Francisco, a team that likes to run the ball as much as they do, Jennings was a good blocker. I don't think, and this is always kind of what happens, like everybody just, there's nothing wrong with asking for and wanting more money. But then when you float that, or maybe I'd like to be moved, well, I don't know how many teams are going to necessarily run to a team like San Francisco and say, oh, well, this role player in a difficult situation last year got more playing time, performed well. I want to bring him in for my team. I want to make him a 1 or a 2. I'm going to pay him more money. I don't know where this team is where Jennings thinks all of a sudden, they're going to have higher interest in him than $7 million a year. But, look, you shoot your shot. This is why you have agents. You're trying to get every dime out of the game as you possibly can while you're here. I just don't know where, this market would be for Jennings. And, in an ideal world, the San Francisco 49ers play much better in 2025, which means maybe Jennings' overall production in 25 is maybe down. It's worth a shot. I don't think Jennings is going to get more money out of San Francisco, and I don't think anybody's running. And certainly we've talked about teams and their wide receiver depth, and we found teams we think the Browns could play ball with here. One of the teams we never hit on was San Francisco. I don't know how many teams are going to be running to San Francisco for, journeyman Jennings, who's always had a really good reputation as kind of being a role player.
I know you've addressed this on Browns 3D. Do you think there's any way that the Browns trade a first-round pick before the season starts?
Well, part of this, and it was just kind of like, a fun exercise. And of course, this happens when it's 4th of July weekend and you're around your friends, everybody's having a good time. You find things to talk about, right? And it was more of, what would warrant the Browns using a first round pick? What happened? Somebody fell through the cracks, and, quarterback certainly would be in the conversation, but, if anybody has a quarterback that's good, they wouldn't be moving him maybe for just essentially a first-round pick. You look at what the Browns' needs would possibly be for 2025, certainly somewhere on the offensive line. If there was a really established left tackle and you can put DeJuan Jones at right tackle, something that the Cleveland Browns certainly would have interest in. I think pass rusher, defensive end is probably something that's always on the market. Of course, all these things can change throughout the season, if guys step up but necessarily don't play as well. I don't know if corner maybe, but if there was a stud, say, God forbid, a stud free safety that the Browns have been trying to chase the entire time for this administration and just never been able to get it right, would that be something to be willing to put a first-round pick on? So there's, there would be possible needs, but it would have to be the right guy. Is certainly really, really young in his career, 22, 23, second year in the league. It's just not working out where he's at. And, would the Browns then say, hey, you know what, that value is there for us right now, right away. So, it was certainly made for, a summer talking point. But I think when you dig deep through it, it comes down to just realizing that there's probably only a couple positions that the Browns would ultimately value spending a first-round pick on in a trade scenario.
Jeff Lloyd, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Anytime. Getting close Friday, and we'll see where everything kind of shakes on down from there.
Sounds good. Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Host of Browns 3D on the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Chris Easterling, Browns beat reporter from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Straight ahead, stay with us.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me. The Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day. Put a little play in your day.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Now what? We got this guy with domestic violence. They wanted to hang Shador for having 2 speeding tickets. What do they want to do with this guy? Bury him under the stadium? Let me know what your thoughts on. But don't they do some background checks? Is this the first time this guy's ever been in trouble or anything? And I love you, brother, and I'll be in touch. I'm very disappointed.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Chris Easterling, Browns beat reporter for the Akron Beacon-Journal. Chris, they do background checks, but man, this is it's a recurring theme as of late.
Yeah, and it's the thing that, look, whatever happens in the courts with this thing, it's going to play out, and we'll see where it goes. Obviously, the allegations are, if they're true, they're not good, includes, closed fist punch to the face, allegedly, and, other things like that. But, it is just, the thing is, like, you didn't, specifically with Quinshon, you hadn't heard any of these red flags. Now, at least publicly. So I don't know what other, background checks that may have shown, but I know from what I had heard, up until this point, I hadn't heard something quite like this. But as a whole, it is every off season now we have dealt with some Browns player getting involved in specifically domestic violence. You had Perry and Winfrey two off seasons ago, where there were multiple occurrences, which ultimately led to him being cut. Last off season, it wasn't even off season. It was on an off day during training camp in August with Mike Hall, their second round pick out of Ohio State. And then, back in May, it was Devin Bush and outside Pittsburgh. He has he's still involved in a domestic violence case that's ongoing. I think he has a hearing this Friday. And now you have this situation with Quinshon Judkins. And, yeah, I think you have to ask the question is, look, you can't hold their hand. And, again, like I say, you hadn't heard anything like this with Quinshon coming in going through the draft process or anything. But at the same time, somehow you have to get the message out there, because you just don't see this with other franchises. You just don't. You would hear more about, a player getting arrested, players getting arrested and everything. But with this franchise, it's just every offseason again, it's something like this that, they're dealing with and having to answer questions about. And at some point, I think the organization has to, I don't know what they can do, I'll be perfectly honest, but there has to be something. They talk about being accountable. Well, what's the accountability here? Because, it just continues to happen.
Yeah, and I get the whole second chances and Andrew Berry. Andrew Berry's a decent guy. I truly believe that. But at some point, this has got to stop. I mean, it's like you said, it's every year, and it's multiple times in the year. So, again, we'll let the legal process play out, but it certainly doesn't sound great. relative to that, you wrote an article about the young running backs needing to fill Nick Chubb's shoes.
Great timing on that, by the way.
we just threw a wrench into that thing, huh?
And that published the morning that about the same time he was apparently getting arrested in Broward County. Dylan Sampson, this is your opportunity.
Yeah.
Jerome Ford, this is your opportunity. You know, Pierre Strong, this is your opportunity because look, it is clear that the new / old offensive scheme that they're going to is going to prioritize run. You know, it's going to make running the football, that wide zone run scheme, a critical piece of the puzzle, and thus with Nick Chubb now in Houston, you deciding to move on, you have to find a run game. And, you know, the thing that Quinshon was going to provide, and we'll see where it goes, you know, again with him, we'll just setting him aside. You know, he was going to be the physical back. And then you have these guys like Dylan and Jerome who are more the lightning, if you see, you know, the lightning part of it, the speed, the burst, the explosiveness, that sort of thing. Well, you know, I wouldn't say that either of those would fit the profile of a guy that you're going to just hand the ball off to 25 times. So you're going to have to manufacture this run game, you know, kind of how you divide the carries up, you know, how you divvy up the workload. They're going to have to find a way. You know, Jerome Ford has shown at times he's a very effective running back in this league. But, you know, Dylan Sampson's coming in. He had a great final season at Tennessee, SEC Offensive Player of the Year. You know, I was listening to an radio interview with somebody from Knoxville last weekend, and they're talking about just the nose he has for the end zone, finding the end zone. And you know, all of this, he's going to have to show it at this level. You know, as great as the SEC is as a college conference, it's not the NFL, and he's going to have to show he can handle that type of. He can be that kind of running back because the Browns even more so now need him to provide that for them.
Yeah, and irregardless of what happens legally with Quinshon Judkins, the NFL has shown you can be cleared legally, and they're still going to come down and suspend you 4, 5, 6 games. So we'll see again what happens. Another article you wrote. How important is David Njoku just to the whole scheme offensively?
Critical. I mean, I think it was part of the problem. It's been part of the problem in recent years outside of 2023 is that when David Njoku isn't effective or, you know, isn't healthy like last year, the passing offense struggles. He is just, for as frustrating as he has been over the course of his career because of the lack of consistency, when he has been good, he is a matchup. He creates matchup issues that very few tight ends in this league create. And they need that, especially with the questions at wide receiver outside of Jerry Jeudy. They need that second big play option in the passing game. And you know, David Njoku kind of going back to his 2023 season would be that. He would be the guy that kind of takes the pressure a little bit off of a Seth Tillman, of Deontay Johnson, of Jamari Thrash, whomever you want to throw into that mix. They definitely need David Njoku to kind of bounce back, be healthy, be something close to that 2023 form of his, especially since, you know, they have to make a decision. This is a contract year for him. I think they want to keep him. They see him as a critical core piece, but at the same time, you got to be on the field and you have to see some, the production, you know, when you out of him in that passing game consistently.
Before we go to break, another one of the articles, kind of a camp position preview. And I'm with you. You got Jerry Jeudy plus a whole lot of questions at wide receiver. Take us through that. And I mean, there are some intriguing guys, but man, there's not a lot of production after Jeudy.
No, there isn't. I mean, that's why Deontay Johnson is such an interesting potential lottery ticket. Is that if 2024 was just this blip for him, and it was one of those years, and a mulligan for him, and he comes back and he plays like he did for multiple years in Pittsburgh. You have something there that, again, it provides some confidence in the passing game, some proven production in the passing game that you can rely on, so that you're not asking Ced Tillman, who I thought really took big steps forward, but we didn't get to see it to fruition because of the concussion that cost him the end of the season. I think he can be a player, but he doesn't have to produce. It's not imperative that he, be from day one that number 2 behind Jerry Jeudy. If a Deontay Johnson can get back to that old form, it allows you said to, maybe a little bit more, ease into it. I'm not saying maybe ease in isn't the right word, but it's just not as much weight on Ced Tillman's shoulders or Jamari Thrash's shoulders to go from what they've been to all of a sudden this, you have to be X number of catches, X number of targets, X number of yards, that sort of thing. Although that's what you want them to ultimately become. If Deontay Johnson can be that, at least it provides some cover for some continued growth.
Chris Easterling, Browns beat reporter for the Akron Beacon-Journal, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Chris Easterling, Browns beat reporter for the Akron Beacon-Journal. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, this is Ryan from Dayton, Ohio. I have a kind of weird question. We never got the details on how long Stefanski and Barry's extensions were. I'm wondering if that's odd or that's something that should be of note. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Chris, I don't think it's a lot of times those things don't get publicized, especially – I think the 3-14 season had a lot to do with why they kind of kept it down low, what those extensions exactly were.
I would guess it's somewhere around the 3 years, 4 years, somewhere thereabouts. But I don't think it's necessarily, something that's really unusual. It's not like say Ryan Day at Ohio State gets an extension. That's a public university, so that's public record. So yeah, you have to announce that the contract's public. But private business, like a private entity like the Browns, like an NFL pro sports team, it's a little different. They can sort of keep that hush hush as much as the interested parties want to keep it that way. But I've said before, I think that this is a 2-year runway for them. I think Jimmy Haslam seemed to make that clear at the owners' meetings when he talked about needing to being a process. The swing and miss on Deshaun Watson, needing to find good football players. I think he's laying out the defense he showed for Andrew and Kevin. I think that's I think he's laying out the pathway that they also get 2026 or into 2026. But look, we've seen the Haslam's before. I mean, let's say this is another disastrous season, and vibe wise, I don't know if I would go into this training camp saying the vibes are, especially with the most recent off the field news, say the vibes are exactly sensational. But I think barring an abject disaster, I do think 2026 is still on. I don't think they're viewing this as hot seat territory right now for either the GM or the head coach.
Yeah, I do think they have to show some progress, though. I'm with you. You wrote an article, 5 non-quarterbacks under the microscope at training camp. I think we can probably put a sixth now with Quinshon Judkins kind of putting himself under the microscope. But you've got Graham, Jones, Deontay Johnson, Swessinger, and Wright. And all of those are important. And of those, who do you think they really need to come through maybe the most?
Mason Graham. I think Mason Graham is, because look, it's not just that you took him where you took him. It's what you did to get to take him. If trading out of 2, trading away potentially this generational talent that you compared to Shohei Ohtani and Travis Hunter, the need and the emphasis that the defense puts on defensive linemen being the focal point of the defense, the focal point of where the pressure comes from. I just Mason Graham has to be, and the lack of young defensive tackles, who have proven young defensive tackles who are playmakers on this defense. I think all of that just puts it more on Mason Graham to be the guy that they need him. They need him absolutely to produce in 2025 and show signs that he was worth that number 5 draft pick.
Yeah, and the thing is if DeJuan Jones shows that he can play left tackle at a reasonably high level, I think that does wonders for what you're able to do in the upcoming draft in 2020. If he can play tackle at a high level, even if you got to flip him to right, that's one position that's you need to find that you have taken care of. So I think DeJuan Jones is a big year for him.
Absolutely. I think with DeJuan, like you say, just show that you can. He's another one. Just show he can stay on the field. Because I've been very intrigued by what I've seen out of him in his 2 years when he's played, but both years have ended. Last year was a little more of a freak injury with the broken fibula, but he's got to finish out a season, play a full season, so you can figure that out. But I still think, because you look at the rest of the offensive line, everybody else is a free agent after this year. So I still think that's a position where going into next year's draft, you need to see as a priority. But if he can show that he can play left tackle, then I think it doesn't minimize it, but it makes it that you're not seeking out that left tackle is such a premium, high profile position on the offensive line. I think, look, if you're looking for a right tackle, I think that's a little easier to get. You don't have to maybe target quite so high in the draft, even though you will have 2 first-round draft picks.
All right, another article you wrote, I'm intrigued by this one as well. 4 non-rookies who could have 2025 breakout seasons. You got Caden Davis, wide receiver, Mike Hall Jr., defensive tackle, who's coming off that injury, Ronnie Hickman, safety, and Isaiah McGuire, edge rusher. Of those guys, who do you think is the one that's most likely to kind of flash?
I think Isaiah McGuire. I think you saw it toward the end of last year. You saw the pressure numbers. You look at the pressure numbers, and they were amongst the best on the team. I think they really like what the kid is. I mean, 23, 24, whatever. But I think they really like what they see out of him and what they believe is a guy who can be part of that answer at the edge rusher spot opposite Myles Garrett. So I think Isaiah McGuire is a guy that, between him and Alex Wright, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how those two guys, recent draft picks by them, how they continue to progress and grow and develop, because, Alex is on a contract year. But if Isaiah McGuire is taking steps to where he's showing he maybe even better than he's progressing farther than Alex Wright, then I think you can let an Alex Wright walk, maybe. I mean, depending on the contract he's looking for, and feel comfortable with what you have there in McGuire.
The other one that's intriguing, and I'm curious, they can't find a free safety that can produce. You went John Johnson III, that was a disaster. Juan Thornhill didn't even have an interception, and he was supposed to be this great ball hawking safety, and he just didn't show up. How much of that is one of the reasons that the defense took a step back, that they can't turn the ball over, and that points right to Ronnie Hickman, who Jim Schwartz thinks he's poised to have a great year.
I think it's one of the number one reasons why the defense took a step back, and Jim Schwartz even said it. He's like, this team, and he didn't pin it all on the DBs, or safety specifically. He said interceptions are a byproduct of multiple things: pass rush, leading to quarterbacks under pressure, leading to making bad decisions, leading to the defense intercepting the pass. But he made a point that it was unacceptable the way they turned the amount of turnovers they created last year. And you look the year before, when they were one of the best defenses in the league, they created a lot of turnovers. Safety in this position, in this defense, is a ball hawking, playmaking position. Grant Delpit works great in the box, especially, but they need somebody deep to make some plays. I mean, they thought they were getting that Juan Thornhill because he made plays in Kansas City, but he didn't make them in Cleveland. The injuries and whatever else being the reason. Rodney McLeod made a couple of plays last year, but he's gone. He retired. So you've got a couple of veterans in camp with Casey and Jenkins, but both of those they're older guys. You'd like to develop your own free safety, and Rodney Hickman's played a lot of football for this team over his first 2 years after being undrafted out of Ohio State, and I think that's this is your opportunity. While Casey and or Jenkins may get run back there at free, this is your chance. Take the baton, take the ball, and run with it, and specifically take the ball from the other team and run with it the other way.
Chris Easterling, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Chris Easterling, make sure you check him out. He is the Browns beat reporter for the Akron Beacon-Journal. Always really good, insightful Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Sam Amico, hoopswire.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me, the Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day. Put a little play in your day.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. National NBA analyst from ESPN, Brian Windhorst, with his thoughts about the possibility of the Cavs trading or signing LeBron James.
A year from now, it's very clear to me that the Lakers are preparing to move on. And again, this is in July. Let's say the Lakers win 57 games. Let's say they go blasting through the Western Conference playoffs. Let's say Luka wins the MVP. Let's say LeBron averages 40 in the finals, okay? Would they then be like, you know what, maybe we should re-sign him? Yeah, okay? But as we sit here in July,
yeah,
it looks like the Lakers are planning on this being the last year for LeBron. So if you get a year from now and LeBron still wants to play into age 42, yeah, I think it's a conversation. But as soon as LeBron opted into that contract, and as soon as the Cavs entered the second apron, it pretty much closed the door on this happening.
Let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. So, Sam, I know you wrote an article about this, and opted into $53 million. The Cavs can only trade 1 for 1, so it's got to be like $53 million. It would be Donovan Mitchell. It would have to be Donovan Mitchell for LeBron James.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen, obviously. Donovan Mitchell at this stage of the game is a superior player to LeBron James, and that's not a shot at LeBron. It's just everybody gets old except for you and I, Dave. So I think that, you look at this situation and all the rumors and the buzz, and much of which is kind of being created by LeBron and his camp. Some of this stuff is generated by the tweets and the reactions that LeBron James is having on social media, and not talking to ESPN when he had an opportunity the other night, saying, I have nothing to say over the weekend. All of these things make for great content and great buzz, but the reality is the only way LeBron James would return to Cleveland is if he took a buyout from the Lakers and agreed to a minimum deal with the Cavaliers, which, a lot would have to go into even that. So, Brian is right. Brian Windhorst is right in the sense that you can't question what he's saying. I mean, if the Lakers really tear through the West, everything changes. The narrative changes. As soon as LeBron James suits up in a Lakers uniform this season, or even goes to training camp, everything changes as far as the narrative goes. So, yeah, I would suspect that, all of this is probably going to happen again next summer when LeBron can be a free agent. But for now, it's really just a long shot for him to play for anybody other than the Lakers this season.
So some other news off the court. Cavs president Koby Altman, the guy who's kind of built the core four and has led them to this stage where they are a title contender. Contract extension through 2029, 2030. Gansey, Brandon Weems also received extensions as they kind of earned that top seed in the East this year. You know what? It's probably well deserved. Koby Altman's done a nice job.
Yeah, without question. I think that you factor in, you start with the fact that, this team became a contender, 4 years after LeBron James left. Koby Altman snuck in there. And if you remember, all the rumors had Donovan Mitchell going to the New York Knicks when he was still with the Jazz and the Cavs. Koby Altman snuck in there at the last second and made that trade for Donovan Mitchell. And, you look at the Cavs last season, 64-18. They've gotten better every year since LeBron James left for Los Angeles in 2018. And now they're true blue contenders. A lot of people, because of other situations with the Pacers and the Celtics, a lot of people have the Cavs pegged as favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference. I would be among them next season. So he's really in the running, Koby Altman. If you look at it, the last 3 years has been in the running or just outright won Executive of the Year or should have won it. So, yeah, that makes sense. He's been there since, since David Griffin left, the year after they won the championship in 2016. And Koby has just been very aggressive, probably the most aggressive head of basketball operations they've had that I can remember, definitely since I've been covering them. And a lot of what he's done is turning to gold. They're just waiting to get to the finals, which, if you're in contention, your main executive is putting you in contention every year. That's a winning situation for the Cavaliers and Koby Altman.
I know you also wrote an article What do you think? What does Kenny Atkinson expect from Evan Mobley?
Yeah, I mean, he went on NBA TV, Kenny Atkinson, during a summer league game and said he expects Evan Mobley to be in the NBA MVP conversation within 2 to 3 years. And he said he should be, So I think that we saw a big leap. That to me was the main thing I noticed about Kenny Atkinson, or I should say, Kenny Atkinson and Evan Mobley, was that Mobley took his biggest leap offensively under Kenny Atkinson. And, Kenny Atkinson came from the Warriors and he had Evan Mobley. He said, one way to get you more involved in the offense is when you get that defensive rebound, you initiate the offense just like Draymond Green does at Golden State. And we saw Evan Mobley do that this season for the first time. His three-point shooting improved greatly, Evan Mobley. His defense got even better, if you can imagine that, being Defensive Player of the Year. So he took that step. But Kenny Atkinson, when he went on NBA TV, he said, he can still get better. And everybody within the organization believes that. And if he does get better, Defensive Player of the Year, the next step would be being in that NBA MVP conversation. At just 24 years old, certainly Evan Mobley has that potential.
Yeah, and again, he's kind of grown into his body as well. Certainly, with guys moving on, Okoro, and there will be guys that enter into the Cavs rotation that weren't there this year. Who do you think's in line to kind of make an impact in that rotation that hadn't this year?
Yeah, I would say the number one guy for me would be Jalen Tyson, who's going to be in his second year. He's kind of a utility guy. He's strong. He's an energy guy. I had one scout tell him to kind of compare him to Aaron Nesmith from the Pacers, who's a starter. He's that big physical guard who can knock down shots and does all the intangibles. And I think that the trade of Isaac Okoro to Chicago for Lonzo Ball kind of created that opening for Jalen Tyson. And he's been fantastic in Summer League. It almost looks like Jalen Tyson has outgrown Summer League already, and really showed signs last year that he could be a regular rotation or regular part of the rotation when he gets the opportunity. So, he'd be the one guy that I think the minutes are there and they have a need for what he brings, which is, he can handle the ball. He can shoot well enough. He's improving in that area. He can really distribute the basketball, and he's a big physical, I would say guard, but, he's almost like a small forward too. So he can really play, and that's the reason I think he'll be in the rotation is he can play small forward. He can play shooting guard. He can run the point in a pinch, and that may be the case sometimes. So I really think that the minutes are going to open up for Jalen Tyson. And I think that the Cavs are very excited about that because if you see teams like the Thunder and the Pacers last season, they had those big physical guards who could do a little bit of everything. And Tyson certainly fits that description.
Well, yeah, the other guys that come to mind when you say that are Ball and to a lesser extent, maybe Tyrese the Proctor, the guy
Proctor,
they took, the guy they took in the second round. Did they get it? Did they get enough to kind of help them? I mean, it wasn't like they needed a bunch of scoring, or they need guys that are physical and kind of tough-minded. And I would say, Larry Nance Jr. fits into that as well.
Yeah, and that's what the Cavs went out. You look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, for example, before last season, they had all those parts, but they didn't make huge splashes. But they went out and got Alex Caruso in a trade and Isaiah Hartenstein, who's the big center. Those guys immediately brought toughness, okay? They weren't big, splashy moves, but they allowed the Thunder to get more physical. Well, Koby Altman at the end of the season said Cavs needed to get tougher for the playoffs. Lonzo Ball definitely brings that. He's a good defender. He's a big physical guard who can handle pressure. He's not going to get thrown off his game if you're kind of bodying him, as we saw happen in the playoffs against the Cavs and their backcourt players. I think Larry Nance Jr., you're right. He's the kind of guy who adds some physicality in the front court, which they definitely needed. He can stay healthy. He's going to help relieve Jared Allen and Evan Mobley so that they don't need to platoon those two and keep one on the floor at all times. You can move Larry Nance Jr. On the court, and he does. He adds that physicality near the basket, even out on the perimeter a little bit, at both ends too. So those are the kind of players that the Cavaliers wanted to go out and get, and they landed them. And then you throw in Jalen Tyson and his potential as that kind of physical, tough player. They've really filled some holes to a team that went 64-18, and I think they've given themselves a little more depth in the sense that, Ty Jerome was not very good. Obviously, was fantastic all season, but was not good against the Pacers, and some injury issues, and it looked like Allen and maybe even Mobley a little bit started to wear down because they didn't have that third big guy, playable big guy, and you would think that Larry Nance Jr. and Lonzo Ball and perhaps Jalen Tyson will answer all that for them.
Sam Amico, HopesWire.com, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
All right, thanks so much for having me, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sam Amico, make sure you check him out, HoopsWire.com. Great stuff, not only the Cavs, but the entire NBA. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.